Some of you know I'm an attorney, and when I went to, actually let's do this. How many attorneys in the room, law students, attorneys, judges, reform lawyers, can you please raise your hand high? We want to see all of them, please. Let's see. Everybody? Okay, so I know what everybody else is thinking. There's too many of us, right? That's too many lawyers in a room of 400 people. But one of the lawyers that you will be happy to meet, and I'm certain of it, is Cheryl Little, our keynote speaker for tonight. Cheryl is an incredible attorney. She has done some amazing work, and I'm sure, as Calvin said, her accolades are so long, and her resume is so long that we don't have the time to go through everything today. But suffice it to say, she graduated from the University of Miami Law School in 1985 with honors. Shortly, she's standing right here and now making me nervous. Shortly thereafter, after graduating from law school, she joined the Haitian Refugees, a well-known, award-winning, nationally recognized organization that protects the basic rights of America's immigrants. Cheryl has received numerous accolades and honors. She regularly appears on national media. One more thing though, that most people don't know, and I don't think Cheryl knows either. This is the 8th annual banquet of Cosmos. In 8 years, she is the first woman keynote speaker at Cosmos. That's right. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an evening. We had our dinner not long ago, and I always like to think we put on a great show, but let me tell you, being here tonight is such an honor and such a privilege. And Cosmos does such amazing work. It's just unbelievable. And Khalid Mirza, who's on our board, we're so fortunate to have him. Every time I come to these dinners, I meet people, and inevitably I leave and I'm thinking about them and how exceptional they are. And especially at a time like this, when there's so many challenges that communities like this face. I can tell you that I remember following the tragic events in 9/11, when countless immigrants, including many, many from the Middle East, no longer felt welcome in the only country they called home. Muslim communities saw members arrested, thrown in detention without charges. They were treated oftentimes extremely harshly, placed in solitary confinement, secret court hearings. On the eve of the war with Iraq in 2003, DHS rolled out Operation Liberty Shield. What did that do? Asylum seekers who weren't suspected of having ties to terrorists, who weren't a flight risk, were being indefinitely detained throughout their entire case. So while we were declaring the need to find liberty and make sure that Iraqis had liberty, people fleeing countries in desperate need of protections were being denied liberty. We saw countless families after 9/11 who had no idea where their loved ones were. And I'm just going to read something from one of them. He said, "Although before I felt like I belonged here, suddenly it felt like other people started talking at me and seeing only where I come from, not the person I am. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what my religion was anymore. I started to feel ashamed of my background. I stopped going to mosque and I stopped speaking Arabic in public because I didn't want to have any problems. I didn't fly anymore because I didn't want to be singled out because I'm Muslim." I heard countless stories from immigrants in detention who loved their religion, who wanted so much to be a part of the country they loved, and who were being treated like terrorists. So many of those people were fleeing countries because they needed the protection that our laws claim they were entitled to. We continue to get lots of calls from people. There was a special registration program many of you may remember. Male, 16 years of age and older, from, quote, high-risk countries, were required to have their fingerprints, their photos taken, and be questioned by authorities on a regular basis. By the end of September 2003, over 280,000 young males had registered. Many of them were trying to see if they could move to Canada. Many people who work in law enforcement, often in very high positions, were very concerned about what was going on and actually pushed back. And I remember one of them was the head of counterterrorism for the CIA chief, and he said, "The idea that you stigmatize whole classes of people and profile them because you think this is going to prevent the next terrorist attack is exactly the wrong way to go about it." And I will say, with respect to the FBI, we have a program, we represent survivors of human trafficking. We work very closely with the FBI. I have a lot of good things to say about them. I just want to make that very clear. After 9/11, I thought, never again would we make the same mistakes that we made after 9/11. Doing things that made us less safe, not more safe. But here we are. And since the election, we've seen a crackdown on immigrants like I have never seen, and I've been doing this for almost 30 years. And once again, our Muslim brothers and sisters in the crosshairs. Shortly after Trump took office, there was an executive order attempting to derail our refugee program, banning countless Muslims from entering, and turning away folks in desperate need of protection. We've seen a drastic reduction in the number of refugees being admitted to the United States. Under Obama, we admitted 110,000 refugees a year. Now, 45,000 are going to be admitted in 2018, the lowest number since 1980. And those who are admitted are undergoing enhanced scrutiny. Okay, there's no question about it. And we're targeting refugees from 11 nations. 10 are Muslim majority countries that made up 44% in 2017 of refugee admissions to the United States. I asked a local lawyer here recently what he thought about what was going on. By the way, I'm having real trouble seeing my notes, but anyway. And he said he's never seen anything like this. He said, when you can't trust your government to protect you, who can you trust? And I think that's a huge problem. Without a single brick, the wall is effectively being built. There's no question about that. Through executive orders, through arrests, through detentions, through deportations. Each month, our government is chipping away at the fundamental laws and policies that guarantee due protection in this country. Each week, there are new hurdles for immigrants and advocates working to help them. We are constantly reevaluating our strategies to try to determine what cases we need to prioritize that week, who should we spend the precious resources we have trying to help. And it's not the bad hombres who are being arrested. In the first 3-4 months of this administration, arrests of non-criminal immigrants went up 150%. Florida had the fastest growing rate of immigrant arrests, 76% this past year. When we go to places like the Broward Transitional Center, they're filled with immigrants who've lived here for years, worked hard, paid taxes, have U.S. citizen children, and broken no criminal laws. Don't go near a Greyhound bus station, because chances are, if you don't have papers to prove you're here legally, you will end up in a place like BTC and be deported. Under President Obama, and even to some extent under President Bush, the priorities for removal were new arrivals and folks with criminal history. Under this administration, all undocumented immigrants are priorities for removal, all. And anyone who arrived in the last 2 years, anywhere in the United States, is a priority for expedited removal. 900,000 people in this country who were not deemed priorities for removal have been able to check in with ICE officials every year, and they would say, okay, we'll see you in a year, now you can go get your work permit, and move on with their lives. Even people like our Lucha clients, survivors of domestic violence, for example, who have pending visas, who are eligible for visas to stay here, can now be told, well, that visa's not going to be eligible for 3 or 4 years, so go back home and wait for it. We'll let you know when you can return. And then we have roughly 1 million people who've been living here with quasi-legal status, like our dreamers. 800,000 dreamers, just amazing kids who did nothing wrong and everything right, now find it hard to sleep at night, now wonder if that job they have they're going to lose, now wonder if they have to return to a country that they've never called home because so many of them arrived here at such a young age. They've been in a emotional roller coaster. The first DREAM Act was introduced in 2001. In 2010, there was a bill that would have helped them, but it failed the Senate by 5 votes. In 2013, there was a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill that included the DREAM Act, which would have helped them, and passed the Senate. Everything I heard was there were enough votes to pass the House, but it wasn't even brought to the floor. And now today, even though our president at one point looked like he really wanted to help these kids, thank goodness for the federal courts, I'll say that, because thanks to the federal courts, these kids can still apply to have their DACA renewed, but until the federal court ruling, 22,000 kids were losing 2,200, kids were losing their status a day. It's remarkable to me that in a country like the United States of America, that prides itself in being the beacon of hope for refugees and people in need of protection, is behaving the way we are today. We also have roughly 300,000 immigrants who've had temporary protected status for upwards of 20 years. Persons from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Haiti. They've been told to pack their bags. They have businesses, they work in our hospitals, they take care of our elderly, our loved ones, they're our nannies. And recently, when our president referred to the countries they're from as a word I won't speak, it reminded lawyers that, well, the decision to end TPS surely wasn't made for the right reasons. It was a racist decision, and so it's being challenged. Even legal immigrants, even legal immigration is at risk. unless you have a good job prospect. Family reunification, we hear this administration talk all the time about chain migration. We're talking about US citizens wanting to petition for their parents, wanting to petition for their siblings, want to petition for other immediate family members. This is why when the president was talking recently about DACA and doing something for the Dreamers, and he said, but we really have to put an end to chain migration, many Dreamers were saying, I don't want something that's going to help me if it's going to hurt my parents. Unaccompanied minor children, fleeing some of the most dangerous countries in the world, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, fleeing vicious gangs. They're now being used as bait. When they arrive in the border, Customs and Border Patrol asks them information about their families here, their parents here, or other people who are willing to take them in. And then that information is passed to immigration, and then immigration knocks on the door of that family member and says, well, it's our understanding you're undocumented, please come with me. That's what's happening. This government is also treating these children much like adults these days, de-designating the unaccompanied minor status they have, which gave them special protections. We're even turning people away at the border, not even allowing them to meet with a Border Patrol officer to make a claim for asylum in the United States. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services recently, you know what they did? They said, well, you know something? We're no longer going to these family values things, that's not really so important anymore. And they changed their mission statement. So people sitting in these offices now, waiting to meet with an officer who's going to make a decision as to whether or not they're able to become a U.S. citizen and achieve the American dream, are looking at the mission statement in the wall and knowing that this doesn't bode well for them. The 2018 fiscal year budget that has been, that this administration wants, calls for $4.5 billion to deal with, quote, illegal immigration, a 66% increase in detention, 51,000 immigration beds filled daily, an additional 100,000 ICE agents, an additional 5,000 Border Patrol agents. Immigration judges are being told that they need to close more cases. They need to hear more cases. They're already completely overwhelmed. Dana Marks, who's the president emeritus of the National Association of Immigration Judges, said, immigration judges hear death penalty cases in a traffic court setting. Children are the most vulnerable. We have about 6 million children under the age of 18, U.S. citizen children, living with an undocumented parent or family member. In December, the president of the United Teachers of Dade County said that her 8-year-old comes home every day talking about some of his classmates who are terrified that their parents are going to be deported. This is what's happening in our community. And as I said, the Citizenship and Immigration Services, no longer does that mission statement say we are a nation of immigrants. Florida is now number 2 in the country for hate crimes. 66 hate groups in Florida, 4 in Miami-Dade County. I'm wrapping up now. Almost 11 million immigrants are without permanent legal status in this country. They're doing jobs that are desperately needed, and they've been building their lives here. Congress's failure to pass comprehensive immigration reform has left our broken immigration system shattered. It's leaving families without basic protections and it's neglecting the critical role that immigrants play in our economy. I want to end on a positive note. The Gold Star father, Kazir Khan, was the keynote at was honored at our dinner a couple of years ago. And he ended by saying this: when we see our basic values are being violated, we need to stand up, we need to speak out, we need to protect one another. Looking at the Cosmos family, the friends, the supporters here, I have no doubt that working together, we will see better days. Thank you.
The one and only Cheryl Little.